Welcome back, Thresholds and Transits. I am glad that you're here. Today is about Venus and Pisces, the radical act of being alive. But first, before we go there, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Megan. My website is meganriley.eu. You can find out more information there about the retreats that I lead, consultations, and also the astrology tab. Now, the astrology tab is a tab on the website, and if you click on that, there are donation-based readings. I'm doing that because I am very new officially to astrology and formal training, and as I go through my formal training, I want to read as many charts as possible. So I am offering them on donation. If you are so inspired, you can send me some money. You don't have to do that, and you don't have to pay anything to sign up. So go to the astrology tab on meganriley.eu. Of course, you can check out all the other tabs and take the assessment, which I think is fun, and look at where retreats, what we're going on. But you can sign up for a donation-based reading right there. Now, I am living in Greece, and so I'm in Eastern European time zone, and I have made available lots of different times, lots of different parts of the day. So if there's something that just does not work for your time because we are on the other side of the world, send me a message and we can find a time. Okay, now back to Venus and Pisces and the radical act of being alive. So Venus moved into Pisces yesterday, the 11th or the 10th. Yesterday the 11th and yesterday the 10th, of February, and I could feel it. I could feel a change in the air. There was a softening. It was a little bit easier for me to get connected to my body in the morning. It was a softness. There was a sensuality to the air. There are flowers out for Valentine's Day. Things are just a little bit extra sweet. And Venus is really happy in Pisces compared to Mercury in Pisces, but we can talk about that in a different story. I want to talk about something that might sound a little strange. And it's about how being well-loved, well-fed, and well-satisfied, and you can read between the lines there, there's the distinction that I call the well-fucked woman, makes you a more dangerous person. And it's not dangerous in the way that the system means dangerous. Dangerous in the way that the system fears, because a woman who is fully resourced, fully in her body, fully alive to take on their own experience, that person is very hard to control. That person is ungovernable. Venus just moved into Pisces, where she will be for the next 6 weeks. And I think this transit is handing us something that we desperately need right now. It's really almost as if it has been designed this way. Not another productivity hack, not another healing modality, not something older and deeper and more fundamental than that. Is a remembering and maybe a little bit of a reminding of what Eros actually is. And why let's talk about the system, had to make you forget. So Eros, before they broke it. Let's start with Eros, because the culture did something very specific to this word, and we need to undo it before we can go any further. When most people hear Eros or erotic, they hear sexual. And they hear that because the whole freight train of judgment that comes with it. The word has been compressed into something small and shamed, and that compression is not at all accidental. The Greeks understood Eros as something completely different. One of the oldest Greek texts that we have, Eros, is one of the first forces to emerge from chaos. Before the gods, before order, before anything had a name, there was chaos, there was Gaia, the earth, and there was Eros, the force that draws things together. This is not about sexual attraction. This is about attraction itself, the fundamental pull that makes anything relate to anything else. This is the reason that atoms bond, the reason you turn your head when something catches your eye, the reason a melody can make you cry before your mind has any idea why. Plato explores this in the Symposium, and it's worth noting that the deepest teaching on Eros in Western philosophy comes through a woman's voice. She describes what's sometimes called the ladder of Eros. You start with desire for a beautiful body, but you don't stop there. You move to love of a beautiful soul, then beautiful ideas, then beautiful systems, until you arrive at beauty itself, the animating principle behind all of it. The erotic is the engine of that entire ascent. You don't transcend it, it's what moves you. So Eros is the spark. When you read a sentence that rearranges something in your understanding, it's the moment your dog puts her head on your knee and something in your chest unlocks. It's the pull towards a statue in a village church in southern France. It's what makes you get into cold water on a February morning. What the system did was take this enormous cosmological force and compress it down to sexual, and then pathologize it even on top of that. What accomplishes two things at once: it cuts you off from the primary navigational instrument, and it makes you ashamed of the one fragment that you're still allowed to access. Nobody understood this better than Audre Lorde. In 1978, she published an essay called Uses of the Erotic as Power. And if you haven't read it, it's maybe 10 pages long, and it will rearrange your furniture. Lorde makes a distinction most people skip right past. The erotic is not the pornographic. The pornographic is sensation without feeling, stimulation without connection, consumption without aliveness. And that, she argues, is exactly what the system offers as a substitute. It gives you the shadow of Eros and calls it the thing. So you keep consuming without ever being nourished. She defines erotic as a measure between two beginnings of our sense of self and the chaos of our strongest feelings. A measure between the beginnings of our sense of self and the chaos of our strongest feelings. It's an internal compass, not an external experience. It's the capacity to feel so fully that your own experience becomes a source of knowledge. She goes further. She says that when women, and I'll extend this to anyone who's been systematically cut off from their own authority, when they begin to live from the erotic, they become less willing to accept powerlessness, resignation, and despair as natural conditions of life. This is not motivational language. This is Audre Lorde describing a political technology in 1978, mind you, a way of knowing that the dominant system genuinely cannot afford for you to access. Because a person who knows what it feels like to be fully alive becomes very difficult to redirect towards the things that deaden them. They stop tolerating jobs that numb them, the relationship that diminishes them, the belief system that requires them to abandon their own knowing. She writes, "Our acts against oppression became integral with self, motivated and empowered from within." That's the key. Protest comes only from outrage. Burns out, always. We're watching it happen everywhere right now. People are burning hot and crashing because the fuel source is external. But protest that comes from Eros, from a deep lived contract with your own aliveness and a refusal to abandon it, that sustains. Because you're not fighting against something, you're refusing to leave yourself. Now I know we're bringing the science, so let's go there. Stephen Porges' Polyvagal theory maps this beautifully. Your autonomic nervous system has three primary states: dorsal vagal, which is shutdown, freeze, collapse, fawn; sympathetic, which is fight or flight; and ventral vagal, which is safety, connection, social engagement. The ventral vagal state, the one where you feel safe and connected, is the same state that supports creative insight, pattern recognition, and what we call intuition. You literally cannot access your full perceptual capacity from a threat state. When you're in sympathetic activation, your visual field actually narrows, your hearing changes, your cognitive processing prioritizes speed over nuance. I start skimming if I'm triggered like that. You're designed to survive, not to perceive subtlety. There's another somatic marker that builds on this. And in his book, Descartes' Error, he demonstrates that the body tags experiences with feeling states that guide decision-making below conscious awareness. Your gut feeling is not a metaphor. It's Eros functioning as intelligence. The body knows before the mind names. So when I say that being well-loved, well-fed, well-satisfied, well-fucked makes you a better thinker, a better creator, a more perceptive human, I'm not speaking poetically. I'm describing a neurological fact. The act of feeding yourself well, sleeping, moving your body in ways that feel good rather than punishing, allowing yourself to be held, touched, nourished. These are not luxuries that you earn after the work is done. They are the infrastructure that makes the work possible. They are what moves your nervous system into the state where you can actually see clearly. And the system knows this, which is exactly why it teaches you to earn rest, to distrust pleasure, to view desire as a distraction from real productivity, hustle culture. A depleted person is a controllable person. A nourished person is a problem. Creativity is protest. This is where it all comes together. If Eros is the force of attraction, the fundamental pull towards aliveness, and if the system survives by cutting you off from that force, then every act of genuine creation is an act of resistance. Not creation as content, not creation as product, creation as the act of making something real from a place of deep contact with your own experience. There was a French feminist, Hélène Cixous, wrote about this in The Laugh of the Medusa in 1975. She argued that writing from the body is inherently subversive because the entire Western intellectual tradition is built on the premise that the body is unreliable and the mind is sovereign. To trust the body's knowing, to follow the spark, to let pleasure be our compass rather than a reward you earn through suffering. That overturns a very old hierarchy. And there's a historical precedent everywhere. In medieval Europe, there were communities of women who lived outside marriage and institutional church control. They created textile art, they wrote mystical poetry, they fed the poor. They weren't separating pleasure from devotion, from creativity, from service. These weren't one activity, one expression of Eros moving through women who had refused to fragment themselves. Making something beautiful or true in a system that rewards compliance is a defiant act. It's not the protest sign that threatens the system. It's the woman who writes the thing that she was told not to write, who builds the life that she was told she couldn't have, who trusts her body when every authority told her it was lying. So taking the next 6 weeks as practice. Let's bring this home to Venus and Pisces. Venus is in Pisces for the next 6 weeks. And Pisces is where Venus is exalted. She is the happiest. It's like going home, knowing exactly where you want to be, where you go, knowing everyone at the grocery store, knowing everyone at the coffee shop. It's knowing what turns to go. It's the place that you feel the most comfortable. This is where Venus principle operates at the highest expression. Not Venus as transaction or acquisition. Venus as permeability, the capacity to be moved, to dissolve the false boundary between giving and receiving, between inner and outer beauty, between self and the world. If we go back to Audre Lorde, these 6 weeks are an invitation to practice Eros as a discipline, not discipline as a restriction, discipline as devotion, returning again and again to the question, where is the aliveness right now? Weeks 1 and 2, so this week and next week, receptivity as practice. Venus is newly in Pisces. She's still acclimating. She's still getting used to herself there. The invitation is to slow the input-output cycle. Where have you been producing without being fed? Where are you consuming without actually tasting? Lorde talks about how we're taught to distrust the erotic and find surrogate satisfaction in external validation. These first 2 weeks are about catching that pattern. The meal eaten slowly, time sitting in the sun, the page of writing that comes from genuine pull rather than obligation. Notice where you're drawn to before your mind intercepts with, but I should. The following weeks, 3 and 4, early to mid-March, creative honesty. This is where the protest dimension gets personal. Venus, deeper in Pisces, starts dissolving the false selves, the performances, the way you've been editing your work or your presence to be palatable. Audre says, living from the erotic means becoming less willing to accept powerlessness. In creative terms, what would you write if you weren't managing anyone's perception of you? What would your work look like if it were organized around genuine desire rather than what the market wants? This is the period to draft the thing that scares you. And then weeks 5 and 6, mid-March to early April, integration and overflow. Venus in late Pisces approaches the boundary with Aries. The dissolving, receptive phase starts to gather force and direction. What you've been absorbing and allowing and softening into begins to want expression, outward movement. This is where Lorde's framework becomes fully realized. The person who reconnected with their erotic knowing becomes an agent of change, not through effort, but through the refusal to abandon themselves. The writing, the offers, the way you show up in your world starts to carry a different frequency, not louder, coherent. So the invitation. The timeline for the whole transit is what Lorde said plainly: the erotic is not a luxury. It is a source of power and information. Venus in Pisces makes this experiential rather than theoretical. You don't have to understand it intellectually. You have to be willing to feel it. And the connection to intuition stays live the entire time. Pisces is the sign most associated with psychic permeability, with knowing that arrives through channels the rational mind cannot map. If Eros is the force of attraction and intuition, is Eros functioning as perception, then these 6 weeks are a period where your perceptual field is wider open than usual. The hits, the nudges, the quiet knowing that arrives when you're nourished and present and not performing. Those get louder during this transit. The practice is learning to trust them without needing to justify them first. So here's where I want to leave you. The most radical thing that you can do right now is not to burn out by trying to fix everything that's broken. It's to refuse to break yourself in the process, to eat the meal, to take the swim, to write the honest thing, to let yourself be moved by beauty without immediately monetizing the experience. This is Eros, and it is protest. That is Venus and Pisces asking you to remember what you knew before they taught you to forget.